Daniel Hayes lived alone in the small human research station called Haven 7. It was not an important place, only a lonely outpost that circled a red dwarf star at the edge of known space. Daniel's work was simple: maintain the life support systems, record asteroid activity, and send weekly reports back to Earth. Most of the time, nothing happened. Days passed quietly. The hum of the machines was the only company he had. Sometimes he talked to himself just to hear a voice. He often wondered if the people at Earth Command even remembered he was out there. But all of that changed one silent night. The station sensors lit up with warning alarms. Daniel rushed to the control room, his heart racing. The main screen showed something huge entering the system. It was not a human vessel. Its design was unfamiliar, its outline broken and scarred. A dark ship limped through space, moving slowly as though every engine pulse caused pain. Daniel swallowed hard. He had read about alien ships, but he had never expected to see one so close. The computer scanned it and displayed a name from human records: Thrin Dominion Warship. Daniel's chest tightened. The Thrin were not friends. They were a powerful alien empire, often called insect-like by human reports, with hard shells and multiple eyes. Stories painted them as ruthless and proud, never bowing to anyone. And yet the ship before him looked nothing like a symbol of power. Its hull was torn. Fires burned inside, visible through cracks. The ship's lights flickered weakly as if struggling to survive. Then the communication console buzzed. Daniel hesitated, staring at the blinking light. If he answered, he might be talking directly to an enemy commander. If he ignored it, maybe they would drift away. Or maybe they would force entry. Finally, he pressed the button. A voice filled the room. It was heavy, layered, strange, but not strong. "This is Queen Sereth of the Thrin Dominion. We request mercy. Our enemies have broken us. We seek refuge, please. We beg." Daniel froze. Queen, the ruler of the Thrin herself, speaking with weakness instead of command. He leaned closer to the microphone. His voice was cautious. "This is Daniel Hayes of Haven 7 Station. I hear your message, but why come here? This is only a small outpost. I have nothing powerful to offer you." For a moment there was only static. Then the Queen's voice returned. "You are the closest. My ship cannot travel farther. We have wounded. We cannot fight anymore." Daniel looked around his tiny station. He had no medical bay, no army, no supplies for aliens. He was only a caretaker. Still, he could hear something in her voice. It was not the voice of a conqueror. It was the voice of someone desperate. He thought of his orders. The manual said, "Do not allow alien warships to dock. Contact Earth Command immediately." But Earth was weeks away. By the time help arrived, the Queen and her people might be gone. Daniel rubbed his forehead. He was just one man. How could he decide something so important? Finally, he took a deep breath and pressed the button again. "This station is small, but I will not turn away the dying. Dock with us. I will do what I can." Minutes later, the alien ship attached itself to Haven 7 with a heavy metallic echo. Daniel stood at the airlock, nervous, a wrench in his hand as his only weapon. The door hissed open. He expected soldiers in shining armor ready to fight. Instead, what stepped through was a tall figure leaning heavily on her staff. The Queen. She was larger than a human, her exoskeleton cracked in many places. Faded markings ran along her shell, once bright with royal color, now dulled by battle and pain. Her many eyes were dim, yet still carried the weight of command. Behind her came a few attendants, each scarred and limping. They did not look like conquerors. They looked like survivors. For a long moment, Daniel and the Queen stared at each other. Neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hiss of the airlock. "You are alone," the Queen finally said, her voice both surprised and weak. Daniel gave a nervous smile. "Alone, yes, but not unfriendly." Her staff trembled in her hand. Slowly, her body lowered to the floor. She was too weak to stand. "Mercy, human. We ask only for mercy." Daniel looked at her, at the proud alien ruler now kneeling on the cold deck of his tiny station. A part of him still whispered that this was dangerous, but another part, deeper and stronger, felt pity. He put down the wrench. Without a word, he walked past her, into the small galley of the station. The cupboards were nearly empty. He had only simple supplies: dried vegetables, powdered broth, a few herbs he grew in a tiny greenhouse. He set a pot on the heater and began to cook. The attendants watched silently, confused. They whispered among themselves in their clicking language, wondering what he was doing. When the pot steamed with warmth, Daniel poured the broth into a metal cup. He returned to the queen, knelt before her, and held it out. "This is all I can offer," he said softly. "Not much. Just soup?" The queen blinked, her eyes narrowing slightly. She had been offered planets and treasures in her life. She had commanded armies. She had ruled with power, but no one had ever knelt before her with something so simple, so human, and yet so kind. She reached out, her clawed hand trembling, and accepted the cup. She lifted it slowly, tasted it, and let the warmth spread through her. Her mandibles clicked faintly, and her eyes shimmered with something Daniel had never thought he would see in a queen of the Thrinn: gratitude. For a long moment, the room was silent. No grand speeches, no bargains, no threats, only an alien queen, broken and tired, drinking soup given by a lonely human caretaker. And in that small act, in that quiet outpost far from Earth, something extraordinary began. The station felt different after the queen arrived. Haven 7 had always been a place of silence and machines, but now every hallway carried strange echoes of alien voices. Daniel walked through the narrow corridors and heard the faint clicking language of the Thrinn attendants. Sometimes their words were sharp and fast, sometimes soft and low, but he could never understand them. The queen rested in the main chamber. She was still weak, though the soup had given her some strength. Her attendants formed a protective circle around her, but even they looked half-starved and broken. Their armor was dented, their weapons lost. They had traveled across the stars, fleeing battles Daniel could not even imagine. Daniel was not a doctor, not a healer, and certainly not a diplomat. Yet now, in this lonely outpost, he had become all three. He entered the chamber carrying a tray with more bowls of soup. His supplies were limited, but he stretched them as far as he could. He set the tray on a low table, and the Thrinn attendants looked at it with suspicion. They sniffed the air, their antennae twitching. "It is food," Daniel explained. "It will help you. It is not poisoned." They glanced toward their queen. Queen Sarath lifted her head slowly, her dark eyes heavy with fatigue. She gave a small gesture with one of her clawed hands, and the attendants obeyed. They each took a bowl, sipping carefully. Daniel watched as their rigid shoulders eased, if only slightly. He felt a strange warmth in his chest. They were not human, not even close, yet hunger was the same everywhere. Finally, the queen herself spoke. Her voice was weak but steadier than before. "You are different from the others we have faced. Why do you not bind us in chains? Why do you not call your armies to finish what our enemies began?" Daniel shrugged lightly. "Because I'm not an army. I'm just one man with a station. And because you asked for mercy," the queen tilted her head as if the word was strange to her. "Mercy is weakness. That is what my kind believes. Yet here mercy tastes like warmth in a cup." She raised the bowl slightly. "Strange." Daniel almost laughed but held it back. He didn't want to insult her. Instead, he said gently, "Sometimes weakness is only kindness in disguise." Her many eyes studied him, unblinking. Daniel could not tell if she respected him or simply found him curious. Either way, the atmosphere shifted. The days passed slowly. Daniel gave up his quarters so the queen could rest in a proper bed. He slept in the control room, surrounded by blinking lights and the hum of the reactor. Every morning he checked the supplies, worried about how little food remained. Every afternoon he repaired parts of the alien ship that hung broken outside, though most of its systems were beyond his understanding. In the evenings, he returned to the chamber with soup or tea. The Thrinn attendants began to lower their guard. They no longer reached for weapons when he entered. Some even clicked in soft tones that almost sounded like thanks. The queen asked questions. "What is this drink?" she asked one evening, sipping tea from a steel cup. "Tea," Daniel replied. "Leaves boiled in water. Humans drink it to relax." She blinked slowly. "Leaves you take plants and put them in hot water?" "Yes," Daniel said with a small smile. "Simple, isn't it?" She considered this carefully, as though the idea itself was a puzzle. Then she gave a sound that was not quite a laugh, not quite a hiss. "You are a strange species," Daniel chuckled. "We've been called worse." But the peace was fragile. One night the sensors picked up another signal, an unidentified ship entering the system. Daniel hurried to the control room, fear rising in his chest. He activated the long-range scanner. The screen showed a small vessel, armed and fast. The queen appeared beside him, leaning heavily on her staff. Her eyes narrowed as she read the data. They are hunters, she whispered. Our enemies. They chase what remains of my fleet. They will find us here. Daniel's stomach tightened. His outpost was not built for combat. One human and a handful of wounded aliens could not fight off a warship. What do we do? He asked. The Queen turned to him, her gaze sharp despite her weakness. You must decide. Hide us or cast us out. If they discover us, they will kill you too. Daniel's mind raced. He had sworn no oath to the Thrinn. They were not his people. Yet, as he looked at the Queen, fragile but proud, and at her tired attendants who had begun to trust him, he knew he could not abandon them. He slammed the console shut. Then we hide. The plan was simple but risky. Daniel powered down most of the station, leaving only life support running. The outpost sank into darkness, appearing lifeless from outside. The alien ship was pushed deeper into the asteroid belt, camouflaged among the rocks. Hours later, the enemy vessel entered orbit. Through the viewing window, Daniel saw its sharp, predatory shape gliding past. Its lights scanned the rocks, seeking movement. His heart pounded so loudly he thought the aliens must hear it through the vacuum of space. Inside the station, the Queen sat perfectly still, her eyes closed in silent focus. Her attendants crouched beside her, weapons in hand, though they knew they were too weak to fight. The hunters circled once, twice, then after endless minutes drifted away into the blackness. When the last trace of their engines vanished, Daniel let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The Queen opened her eyes and looked at him. You risked your life, she said. For us? Daniel gave a tired smile. That's what neighbors do, even if we're very, very distant neighbors. For the first time, her mandibles curved in what might have been a faint smile. That night, Daniel returned to the galley. He prepared another pot of soup, stretching the last of his vegetables. When he carried it back to the Queen, she accepted it without hesitation. Human, she said softly. Your kindness confuses me. My people would never have shown the same. If you had fallen into our hands, you would not have found soup waiting for you. You would have found chains. Daniel placed the cup in her hands. Maybe that's why you lost. Maybe mercy isn't weakness after all. The Queen was silent for a long moment. She sipped the soup slowly, her eyes thoughtful. Something was changing in her, something Daniel could not yet name. And as the stars turned silently outside the station windows, the lonely caretaker and the weary Queen sat together, not as enemies, but as two beings who had begun to understand one another. Life inside Haven 7 grew into a strange routine. For the first time since the outpost had been built, the station was not silent. The sound of Thrinn voices echoed in the halls, sometimes sharp, sometimes soft. Their shadows moved across the walls, insect-like but calm, no longer filled with threat. Daniel Hayes still felt like an outsider in his own home. He walked carefully, carrying trays of soup, bread, or tea to the main chamber where Queen Serath rested. Her attendants watched him with suspicious eyes, though less hostile than before. Their bodies were recovering, though slowly. The Queen herself was different. She had regained some strength. Her shell no longer seemed so fragile, and her voice carried more power each day. Yet her words were not the commands of a conqueror. Instead, she asked questions. She wanted to understand him. One morning, Daniel entered the chamber with a small bowl of porridge. It was not much, just oats boiled in water with a little honey he had saved, but it was warm. The Queen raised her head as he placed the bowl near her. What is this? She asked. Breakfast, Daniel said simply. The first meal of the day. She tilted her head, curious. Humans divide their meals. Do you not simply feed when hungry? Daniel smiled. We like routine. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. It gives structure to our day. Structure, the Queen repeated slowly. She touched the rim of the bowl with her claw. My kind knows structure in battle lines and ranks in empire. But to find it in something as simple as food. Curious, she tasted it carefully. The sweetness of honey surprised her. Her mandibles moved slowly as she ate, and her eyes softened just slightly. Daniel chuckled. You like it? Her many eyes flickered toward him. It is strange, but not unpleasant. Days passed like this. Each time Daniel brought food, conversation followed. Sometimes the Queen asked about Earth, its oceans, its forests, its cities that glittered with light. Daniel described rainstorms, the smell of soil after fresh rain, the sound of children laughing in crowded streets. At those moments, the queen would grow quiet, as if imagining it. Her attendants would lean closer too, listening to every word. Other times, she spoke of her own world. She described great hives stretching across deserts, towers of crystal rising from the sand, and the endless march of her soldiers beneath the suns of her home system. Her voice carried both pride and sorrow, for much of it was now lost. "You think your people will rebuild?" Daniel asked one evening. The queen looked down at her claws. "Rebuild, yes, but not the same. Defeat changes all things, even queens." Daniel thought about that for a long moment. Maybe change isn't always bad. But not everything was calm. The Thryn attendants struggled with boredom and frustration. They were warriors trained for battle, not for sitting in silence on a human station. Sometimes they clicked angrily among themselves. Daniel could not understand the words, but he understood the feeling. One evening, as he entered the chamber, he found two attendants standing close to him, their bodies tense. One of them hissed sharply in their language, pointing at the food he carried. Daniel stopped, uncertain. "What's wrong?" The queen raised her hand, silencing her attendants. She spoke to them firmly, then turned to Daniel. "They fear you may control us with your food, that your kindness is a chain." Daniel blinked, surprised. Then he set the tray down and stepped back. "If that's what they believe, they can choose not to eat. I won't force anyone." For a long moment, the chamber was tense. Then the queen herself reached for the bowl and ate calmly in front of them. Her attendants lowered their heads, ashamed. "You see," she said to them in her own tongue. Then she looked at Daniel. "Trust is not easily given, but I will remind them." Daniel nodded quietly. He did not expect thanks, but the queen's action had spoken louder than words. Later that night, Daniel worked in the control room, repairing damaged circuits. He heard the soft steps of the queen behind him. She leaned against the doorway, her eyes watching the blinking screens. "You defend us, feed us, shelter us," she said slowly. "Yet you ask for nothing. Why?" Daniel set down his tools and sighed. "Because it's the right thing to do." Her head tilted slightly. "The right thing. For you or for humanity?" "For me," Daniel replied. "I don't know what humanity would say. Maybe they'd call me a fool. But when I saw you on the floor asking for mercy, I couldn't walk away." The queen studied him for a long moment. Finally, she stepped closer. Her presence filled the small room, tall and imposing, yet not threatening. "Perhaps your kind is dangerous in ways mine never understood," she said softly. "Not with weapons, but with this." She gestured faintly toward him. "This strange mercy?" Daniel gave a small, tired smile. "Maybe." The following days brought lessons. Daniel began to teach the queen simple human customs. He showed her how to use utensils properly, how to brew tea, even how to read some human letters on the screens. She learned quickly, her sharp mind absorbing details with ease. In return, she taught him about the Thryn. She showed him symbols scratched onto a piece of metal, their royal script. She explained the different colors of their shells, how each one marked rank and role. She spoke of honor, of duty, of strength. One night, as they sat across from each other with cups of tea, she looked at him thoughtfully. "If my people knew their queen sat here, drinking human leaves boiled in water, they would not believe it." Daniel grinned. "If my people knew I shared tea with an alien queen, they wouldn't believe it either." The queen made a low sound, something between a laugh and a sigh. Yet danger was never far. On the 12th day since their arrival, the sensors lit up again. Another ship entered the system. This time it was larger than before. Its energy readings were strong. Daniel's chest tightened as he read the data. The hunters had returned, and they were not searching blindly. The queen stood beside him, her staff firm in her hand. Her eyes burned with sudden fire. "They know. They have followed our trail. This time they will not pass us by." Daniel swallowed hard. Haven 7 could not fight them. If the enemy discovered the station's true occupants, they were finished. He turned to the queen. "Then we need a new plan." Her eyes locked with his, and for the first time he saw not just a queen, but a leader ready to stand again. "Then we fight," she whispered. "Not with armies, with what we have." Daniel nodded slowly, fear and courage mixed in his chest. He was only one man. She was a broken queen. But together, maybe they could make a stand. And in the dark silence of space, Haven 7 waited, caught between survival and destruction. The hunter's ship drifted into the system like a shadow with teeth. It was larger than the first one. its hull bristling with weapons, its engines burning steady and strong. Haven 7's sensors showed no weakness in its design. Whoever commanded that vessel had come prepared. Daniel Hayes stood in the control room, his hands gripping the edge of the console. His throat felt dry and his heart pounded like a drum. He had no illusions. Haven 7 was not a warship. It was a fragile station built for science and monitoring. Against a hunter's vessel, it was like paper against fire. Behind him, Queen Sarath entered with her staff. Though her body still carried cracks and scars, her posture was straighter, her eyes brighter. She had regained enough strength to stand tall again. "They are searching," she said, her voice sharp. "They will find us soon." Daniel nodded grimly. "We can't run. Your ship is too damaged, and this station was never meant to move." The Queen's mandibles twitched slightly, a gesture of thought. "Then we must outthink them." For hours they planned. Daniel explained the station's systems: weak shields, a small communications array, mining lasers used only for cutting asteroids, and a cargo bay filled with rocks collected from the belt. Not much. The Queen listened carefully, then shared her knowledge. "Hunters expect battle. They will not expect trickery. If we strike not with strength but with cleverness, we may survive." Her attendants nodded in agreement. Though weary, their warrior spirits burned with new light. Daniel took a deep breath. "All right then. Let's give them a surprise." The enemy vessel approached slowly, scanning the asteroids. Daniel powered down the station again, leaving only life support active. From the outside, Haven 7 looked like a dark, abandoned shell, but inside preparations had begun. The mining lasers were reprogrammed to fire in short bursts. Cargo containers filled with ore were moved to the launch bay, set to eject suddenly like shrapnel. The station's comms were rigged with false signals to confuse scanners. Daniel worked side by side with the Queen's attendants. Though they spoke little of his language, they learned quickly, following his gestures and instructions. For the first time, human and Thrin labored together, united by survival. Queen Sarath oversaw everything. Her presence was steady, her voice calm but commanding. Though weakened, she was still a queen, and the warriors obeyed her without question. Daniel couldn't help but notice the change in her. When she had first arrived, she had begged for mercy. Now she carried herself as if mercy had given her new strength. The hunters drew closer. Their scans brushed against the station like invisible fingers. Daniel's hands shook as he adjusted the sensors. "They're locking on," he whispered. The Queen's voice was calm but sharp. "Wait, not yet." The hunters fired a probing shot, a pulse of energy that struck the station's hull, testing for life. The lights flickered, but the power remained steady. Haven 7 stayed dark, pretending to be dead. The hunters drifted closer, circling. Their weapons began to glow. "Now," the Queen commanded. Daniel slammed the controls. The cargo bay exploded open, releasing hundreds of ore-filled containers into space. At the same time, the mining lasers fired in bursts, their beams scattering across the asteroid field. The hunters reacted instantly. Their scanners were overwhelmed by false signals. The floating ore reflected their sensors, creating dozens of ghost readings. To their instruments, it looked like multiple ships had appeared from the rocks. "Confusion," the Queen said, her eyes gleaming. "Now strike." Daniel triggered the station's thrusters, pushing the debris cloud toward the hunter ship. The containers, heavy with rock, slammed into its shields. Sparks flared as the enemy vessel spun slightly off course. The attendants cheered in their clicking language. For the first time, they saw hope. But the hunters were not fools. Within minutes, they recalibrated their scanners and fired a sweeping blast. Several ore containers shattered, scattering fragments across the void. "They're adapting," Daniel muttered. "Then adapt faster," the Queen replied firmly. Daniel thought quickly. If we overload the reactor and vent plasma through the station's exhaust ports, it might look like a second ship is firing on them. The Queen's mandibles twitched. "Do it." Together they worked. Daniel rerouted power while the attendants held lines steady and replaced fuses. Soon the station roared with energy. Streams of glowing plasma shot into space, creating the illusion of a hidden weapon. The hunters hesitated. Their scans wavered again, unable to tell if a new threat had appeared. "This is working," Daniel whispered. But then the enemy ship fired back. A heavy blast struck the side of Haven 7, shaking the entire station. Panels fell from the ceiling. Sparks flew from the consoles. Daniel hit the floor, coughing in the smoke. The Queen stood firm. Her staff dug into the deck as she shouted to her attendants. They rushed to stabilize systems, clicking orders at each other. Daniel pulled himself up and slammed his fist against the console. "We can't take another hit like that." The Queen moved beside him. Her eyes burned with fierce light. "Then one strike must be enough. Show me what weapon remains." Daniel stared at the controls, thinking. Then his eyes fell on the asteroid belt outside. His mind raced. "The ore isn't enough," he muttered. "But the rocks." He activated the tractor beams, weak but functional. Slowly, painfully, they pulled at a massive asteroid nearby. The hunters didn't notice at first, focusing on the station. Then the Queen understood. Her eyes widened. "You would throw a mountain at them." Daniel's voice was steady. "If that's what it takes." Together they adjusted the beams. The asteroid began to drift, its enormous bulk sliding into the hunter's path. The enemy ship finally detected the movement and fired at the rock, but its surface was thick and unyielding. The blast shattered parts of it, but the core remained solid. With one final push from the tractor beams, the asteroid slammed into the hunter's vessel. The impact echoed silently through space. The enemy ship cracked along its side, fire bursting from its hull. Pieces of metal scattered into the dark. Its engines flickered, then died. The hunters were broken. Inside Haven 7, silence filled the control room. Daniel slumped back in his chair, breathing hard. His hands trembled, his face covered in sweat. The Queen stood tall beside him, her staff steady. For a long moment, she simply watched the wreckage drifting outside. Then slowly, she turned toward him. "You fought with us," she said softly. "Not as a soldier, but as more than a soldier." Daniel gave a weak laugh. "Just a caretaker with a station." Her eyes softened. "No, a man who gave soup and strength." That night, as the attendants repaired damage to the station, Daniel and the Queen sat in the galley once more. The soup was thin now, stretched from the last of his supplies, but it was warm. The Queen lifted her cup slowly. "To survival," she said. Daniel lifted his own cup. "To mercy," he answered. They drank in silence, both knowing the fight was not yet over. The galaxy was wide and enemies remained. But for now, in the fragile safety of Haven 7, they had won a small but powerful victory. And for the first time, Daniel saw not just an alien queen, but a companion in the dark. The station felt different now. It was no longer the lonely outpost Daniel once kept in silence. It had become a strange meeting place of two worlds. The quiet, ordinary human life he knew, and the broken royalty of the Thrin Dominion. The alien queen, Sarath, had remained longer than anyone expected. Her attendants worked quietly on repairing what they could of their ship, but the queen herself often chose to stay near the small human galley, where Daniel's simple meals were made. One evening, as the red dwarf star outside cast a soft glow over the metal walls, Sarath spoke with Daniel once more. Her voice was steadier now, though still marked with the memory of loss. "You confuse me, human," she said, her mandibles moving in a careful rhythm. "Empires have spoken to me with threats. Generals have spoken to me with offers, but you give me soup and you act as though it is enough." Daniel stirred the pot in front of him and chuckled. "That's because it is enough. Sometimes survival doesn't need big speeches or battles. Sometimes it just needs warmth, food, and someone to share it with." Sarath tilted her head, her many eyes reflecting the light. "Warmth, food, sharing. Simple words. But for my people, survival has always meant conquest. If we did not conquer, others would conquer us. To rule was to live." "And yet," Daniel replied, ladling soup into a bowl, "when all that ruling and conquering was stripped away, what saved you here was not your crown or your armies. It was a meal shared in peace." The Queen accepted the bowl with both hands. She sipped slowly, her body language showing the strange calm she had begun to feel whenever she ate human food. There was no poison in it, no scheme, no condition, just the gift of life in a simple form. Days passed, and soon the supply ship from Earth was due to arrive. Daniel knew the commanders would demand answers. Why had he let an alien vessel dock? Why had he given aid to a queen of a rival empire? His career might end. He might even face trial. But Daniel no longer felt fear. He had seen something greater than rules and orders. One night the Queen came to him, her steps softer than usual. Her attendant stayed behind. She was alone with the human in the quiet galley. "Daniel Hayes," she said, her voice calm but heavy. "Our ship is near repair. We will soon depart. But before we leave, I must ask you a question that weighs on me. Daniel turned from the counter where he was cleaning dishes. Ask. Why? She said simply. Why did you help me? Why risk your safety, your orders, your life? For me, for my people? You could have locked the airlock. You could have called your fleet. Instead, you gave me soup. Daniel dried his hands on a cloth and looked at her. His expression was not proud, not calculating. It was quiet and human. Because you asked for mercy, he said, and I had no power to give you that. I can't change empires. I can't end wars. But I could give you something small that still meant life. A bowl of soup. Warmth. That was all I had. And sometimes the little things matter most. The queen was silent for a long time. Her people believed in power and glory and conquest. Yet this simple human had undone centuries of belief with an act so small it seemed laughable, and yet so great it changed her heart. When the Earth supply ship finally arrived, the docking bay buzzed with tension. Officers stepped aboard, ready to confront the lone caretaker. But what they found stunned them. The alien queen herself waited in the bay, her attendants standing behind her. She bowed her tall, scarred frame toward the human officers, a gesture no Thryn ruler had ever given to outsiders. Your caretaker gave me life when my empire could not, she declared. He gave me food when all others gave me fear. For this, the Thryn owe him a debt greater than gold, greater than planets. We owe him respect. The officers exchanged confused glances. They had prepared for hostility, for confrontation, but instead they saw a queen speaking words of peace. Daniel stood quietly at the back, watching. He had no interest in honors or diplomacy. He only wanted the moment to pass without violence. The queen's ship was repaired, and the time came for her departure. The attendants loaded supplies and the engines hummed with new energy. But before leaving, Queen Serath came once more to the galley. She carried something in her hands, a small crystal container glowing faintly. She set it gently on the table. This is a seed from the Thryn homeworld, she explained. It grows into a great tree that can live 1,000 years. It is my last gift to you, Daniel Hayes. Where you plant it, it will grow. Let it be a reminder that once, in the dark of space, one human gave mercy in the form of soup. Daniel smiled softly and accepted the gift. I'll find a good place for it. The queen studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. You may not believe it, human, but this changes everything. Empires fall, empires rise, but kindness lingers. And with that she turned, her attendants following, and boarded her ship. The great vessel lifted from the docking bay, its wounds healed enough to carry it home. Slowly it disappeared into the black sea of space. When the silence returned, Daniel sat at the galley table staring at the crystal container. He thought about how strange the universe was. A queen had begged him for mercy. A human had given her soup. And now perhaps a seed of peace had been planted, not just in soil but in the hearts of two species. He poured himself one last bowl from the pot, steam curling into the air. He raised it slightly as if toasting an invisible friend far among the stars. To mercy, he whispered, and to soup. The station lights hummed, the stars burned quietly outside, and the human ate in peace, knowing the galaxy would never be quite the same again.